The Thompsons had lived in their rural mountain home for nearly 2 decades. The large property sat at the bottom of tree-covered hills, about an hour's drive from the nearest city. It had become their perfect hideaway from busy city life over the years. Tom and Lily had watched their 2 kids grow up here, fixed up the house just how they liked it, and learned how to handle country living. One of the most important things they'd done was put in a huge 5,000-gallon water tank near the edge of their land. The morning started like any other summer day. Lily was watering her vegetable garden while Tom fixed a broken fence post. Their old dog Buck lazed in a patch of shade, occasionally lifting his head to watch a butterfly. The sky was clear blue, with only a few puffy clouds floating by. It was peaceful, the kind of peaceful that made them grateful every day for choosing this life away from the noise and rush of the city. The sound of tires on gravel broke the quiet. A white county truck pulled into their driveway, and Lily straightened up, pushing her hat back on her head. She didn't recognize the vehicle, and they rarely got visitors this far out, especially on a Tuesday morning. A man in a tan uniform stepped out, carrying a clipboard and wearing the serious expression of someone who wasn't making a social call. He introduced himself as Inspector Rodriguez from the county planning department. He was polite but all business as he asked to see their water tank. "Been doing routine checks through this area," he explained as they walked around to where the massive tank stood. The metal cylinder gleamed in the sunlight, painted a forest green to blend with the surroundings. It had been there so long that wildflowers grew around its base, and a family of lizards had made their home underneath it. The inspector walked around the tank slowly, making notes and taking measurements with a yellow tape measure. His face grew more serious with each number he wrote down. "I'm afraid there's a problem," he finally said, looking up from his clipboard. "According to county records, you never filed for a permit for this tank." Lily felt her stomach tighten. "That can't be right. We put this in 12 years ago." "That may be true, but there's no record of approval." The inspector pointed to the edge of their property. "Plus, it's sitting 18 inches too close to your property line. Current code requires a minimum setback of 10 feet. Tom joined them, wiping his hands on an old rag. 18 inches? You're kidding, right? Nobody's complained about this tank in all these years." The inspector didn't smile. "Rules are rules, folks. I understand it's frustrating, but I have to issue this violation notice." He tore a pink paper from his clipboard and handed it to Tom. "You have 14 days to either move it to comply with the setback requirement or remove it entirely. After that, there's a daily fine of $250. Lily read the notice over Tom's shoulder, her hand covering her mouth. "But this tank is our emergency water supply. We need it, especially during fire season." "You can reapply for a permit and reinstall it properly," the inspector said, already walking back to his truck. "The county office can help you with the paperwork." They watched him drive away, dust from the road hanging in the air long after he was gone. Tom crumpled the paper in his fist, then thought better of it and smoothed it out again. $5,000 in fines after 20 days, he said quietly. "We can't afford that." That evening, they sat at their kitchen table with cups of coffee gone cold, looking over maps and measuring the property lines again. The problem was clear. The tank really was 18 inches too close to the edge of their property. The neighbor on that side was a national forest, trees that couldn't complain about setback violations. But that didn't matter to the county rules. "We could fight it," Lily suggested. "Get a variance or something." Tom shook his head. "That could take months of hearings, lawyer fees, and we might still lose. Then we'd be out the money and still have to move it." After a long talk weighing all their options, they decided to follow the rules. Tom called a local contractor the next morning, a guy named Pete who specialized in big water tanks and had actually helped install theirs years ago. 18 inches? That's just plain silly, Pete said over the phone. "But yeah, I can help you out. Got a spot free next Monday." The weekend passed with Tom and Lily marking out where the tank would eventually go back. Properly permitted this time, with all the right paperwork. They spent Sunday afternoon filling water jugs in plastic containers, storing them in the garage, just until we get the tank back, Tom assured Lily. 2 weeks tops. Monday morning came, and Pete arrived with his flatbed truck and a helper. They watched with heavy hearts as the massive tank was drained, disconnected, and slowly winched onto the truck. It looked strange up there. This big metal cylinder that had been part of their property for so long, now strapped down like ordinary cargo. "I'll keep it safe at my yard," Pete promised as he secured the last strap. "Call me when your paperwork comes through." That evening, the local news played in the background as they ate dinner. The weatherman appeared on screen with a colorful map showing the whole region covered in red. "Continuing our extreme fire danger warning for the 5th straight day," he said. "With temperatures reaching record highs and humidity at record lows, conditions are perfect for wildfire. Authorities urge residents to clear brush from around homes and ensure emergency water supplies are ready." Tom and Lily looked at each other across the table, the same thought crossing their minds. Their emergency water supply was sitting in a contractor's yard 15 miles away. "It'll be fine," Tom said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "What are the chances of a fire starting right now?" Outside their window, the summer sun set in a brilliant orange sky, casting long shadows across their land. In the distance, the pine forest that surrounded their property stood dark and still in the evening light. After months without rain, every needle and branch was dry as paper, just waiting for a spark. 3 days passed since Pete hauled away their water tank. Lily stood in the backyard, pinning wet clothes to the line. It was early morning, her favorite time of day. The birds usually sang so loudly it was like they were trying to outdo each other, and the air felt fresh and new. But this morning felt different. Lily paused, a damp shirt in her hands, and looked up. Something wasn't right. The usual crisp view of the mountains looked blurry, like someone had smudged the horizon with their thumb. A thin gray haze hung in the air. She sniffed. There it was, that unmistakable smell. Not the pleasant woody scent of a campfire or fireplace, but something sharper, more concerning. She'd lived in these mountains long enough to know what it meant. "Tom," she called, dropping the shirt back into the basket. "Come out here." Tom appeared at the back door, coffee mug in hand. He squinted at the sky, then at his wife's worried face. "Could be someone burning trash," he suggested, but his tone lacked conviction. Lily shook her head. "Nobody would burn trash with the fire risk this high. This is wildfire smoke." They went inside and turned on the local news. The ticker at the bottom of the screen confirmed their fears. "Lightning strike ignites fire in Westridge area, approximately 20 miles from Pine Valley." The reporter, a young man standing on a hilltop with smoke visible in the distance behind him, tried to sound reassuring. "Fire officials state that the blaze is currently contained and moving away from populated areas. No evacuation orders have been issued at this time." Tom muted the TV. 20 miles away and moving in the opposite direction. We should be fine." "I hope so," Lily said, but she walked to the hall closet and pulled out their emergency backpacks, anyway checking that everything was still there. Flashlights, first aid kit, important papers, and waterproof pouches. Throughout the day, they tried to go about their normal routine. Tom worked on fixing a broken fence post, and Lily made bread. But every few minutes, one of them would step outside to check the sky or sniff the air. By late afternoon, the haze had thickened. The mountains that had been merely blurry that morning had now disappeared completely behind a curtain of gray. The sun turned an eerie orange-red, casting an unnatural light across their property. "Reminds me of those old horror movies," Tom said as they stood on their back deck watching the strange sunset. "When everything suddenly turns red and you know something bad is about to happen." Lily nudged him with her elbow. "Don't say that." The crunch of tires on gravel announced visitors. Their neighbors, the Wilsons, pulled up in their pickup truck. Jack and Nancy had lived on the adjacent property for even longer than Tom and Lily, over 30 years. "Thought we'd check in," Jack said, climbing the porch steps with a six-pack of beer. His weathered face looked more lined than usual with worry. "Nancy made too much stew again." Nancy followed behind with a large pot. "Figured we could share dinner and compare notes." They sat on the deck despite the smoke smell growing stronger. The food and company provided a welcome distraction from their worries. Remember that big fire back in 18? Jack asked, popping open a beer. The one that came through Deer Creek Canyon? Everyone thought it was heading north, then the wind changed and it jumped 3 fire breaks in a single night. Nancy nodded. Burned right up to the Johnsons' place. Would have taken their house too if they hadn't had that big pond. Tom and Lily exchanged glances. They both knew what the other was thinking about. The empty concrete pad where their water tank had stood just days before. We've already got our evacuation bags packed, Nancy continued, stirring her stew. Not taking any chances this year. The drought's made everything so dry. Bags are by the door, Lily said. Car keys and wallet too. As darkness fell, they could see an orange glow reflecting off the clouds to the west. Still distant, but definitely there. The conversation turned to evacuation routes, meeting points, and which neighbors might need help getting out if it came to that. The Johnson family up the road has a new baby, Lily mentioned. And old Mr. Parker might need assistance. By the time the Wilsons left, it was fully dark, but the night sky had a strange quality to it, not the usual deep black, sprinkled with stars, but a hazy reddish gray, with no stars visible at all. Tom and Lily went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. The smoke smell had infiltrated the house despite closed windows. The bedroom felt unusually warm, even with the ceiling fan running. Around midnight, Lily woke with a start. At first, she couldn't pinpoint what had disturbed her. Then she realized the smoke smell had grown much stronger. She slipped out of bed and went to the window. Outside, tiny gray particles drifted through the beam of their porch light like snow. She watched, mesmerized, as ash from a fire miles away floated down onto their property, covering the garden, the driveway, the empty spot where the water tank had been. She opened the window a crack and immediately regretted it, as acrid air rushed in. In the distance, the orange glow had grown larger and brighter. She could now make out actual flames flickering on the ridge perhaps 5 miles away. "Tom," she said, shaking her husband awake. "Tom, wake up." He rolled over, blinking in confusion. "What's wrong?" "The fire's changed direction. It's coming this way." Tom got up and joined her at the window. They stood silently, arms around each other, watching the distant flames dancing on the horizon. The fire that had been moving away from populated areas just hours ago was now clearly heading straight toward them. "Should we leave now?" Lily whispered. "Get ahead of it?" Tom checked his phone. No emergency alerts yet. "Let's wait for official word. But let's get everything ready." They moved through the dark house, gathering the items they couldn't bear to lose. Photo albums, the quilt Lily's grandmother had made, Tom's father's pocket watch. Buck, their old dog, sensed their anxiety and followed close at their heels, whining softly. As Tom loaded bags into the car just in case, Lily stood in the yard looking at the empty concrete pad. If their water tank were still there, they might have had a fighting chance against stray embers. The fire truck could have refilled here instead of having to go miles back to town. But now all they had was a garden hose connected to their well pump, barely enough pressure to reach the roof. She whispered a quiet prayer that the wind would change again, pushing the fire in another direction. But deep down, as ash continued to fall like gray snow around her, she knew they were more vulnerable now than they had been in years. Tom and Lily managed to get a few hours of fitful sleep. They woke at dawn to a sky that had no business being at dawn. Instead of the usual gentle pink and blue of sunrise, the world outside their window was a muddy orange-brown. The sun was just a dim red ball trying to push through the thick smoke. Tom turned on the coffee maker while Lily checked her phone. No alerts yet, which seemed strange given how much worse the smoke had gotten overnight. "Maybe it's not as bad as it looks," Tom suggested, peering out the kitchen window at their ash-covered yard. Even as he said it, a pine cone dropped from one of their trees with a thud, followed by another. The heat was making them open prematurely. Lily was about to respond when both their phones blared simultaneously with the harsh electronic tone of an emergency alert. They jumped even though they'd been half expecting it. The message was brief and to the point. "Wildfire emergency. Evacuation order for Pine Ridge, Summit Road, and Mountain View areas. You have 1 hour to evacuate. Check local news for details. They stared at each other for a moment, the reality sinking in. 1 hour, Lily whispered. Tom nodded, already moving. I'll get the cars loaded. You grab whatever else we need. They'd rehearsed this in their heads a dozen times since yesterday, but the actual moment still felt surreal. Lily moved from room to room, adding last-minute items to their bags. Medicine from the bathroom cabinet, the external hard drive with all their photos, the framed picture from their wedding day. Buck sensed the urgency and followed her anxiously, from room to room, whining softly. It's okay, boy, she assured him, though her voice shook a little. We're just going on a little trip. Outside, the sound of cars and trucks rumbling down their road had already started. Neighbors heading out, following the evacuation order. Tom was methodically loading their 2 vehicles, the pickup truck and the old station wagon. The bigger, heavier items went into the truck, while the station wagon would carry Buck and their most precious belongings. Lily called Pete, the contractor who had taken their water tank. Any chance we could get it back? Right now? It's an emergency. I wish I could help, Pete said, and she could hear the genuine regret in his voice. But we've been ordered to evacuate our yard too. Everything's locked down tight, and I've already sent my workers home to take care of their own families. Lily thanked him and hung up, trying to swallow her disappointment. It had been a long shot anyway. A sheriff's deputy's SUV crawled slowly down their road, its lights flashing. The deputy didn't need to use the loudspeaker. He just rolled down his window and made eye contact with each resident he passed. 1 hour, he reminded them. Fire's moving fast. They could see now just how fast. The ridge that had shown only distant flames last night was now fully engulfed, and the fire line had moved noticeably closer. The wind had picked up too, carrying burning embers ahead of the main fire. Tom stood in their front yard, garden hose in hand, awkwardly trying to spray water onto their roof. Without the powerful pump from their water tank, the standard house pressure barely reached the gutters, let alone the peak of the roof. This isn't doing any good, he admitted, frustration clear in his voice. He dropped the hose and went back to packing. Neighbors drove past, cars and trucks loaded with whatever they could carry. Old Mr. Parker from up the road honked as he drove by, his ancient station wagon packed so full that things were tied to the roof. The Johnson family followed in their minivan, baby seat visible in the back window. 45 minutes into their 1 hour warning, they were nearly ready. Lily stood in their bedroom one last time, looking around at the life they'd built. The bed where they'd slept for 20 years, the handmade quilt, the view from the window that had greeted her every morning. We'll be back, she told herself firmly. This isn't goodbye. She grabbed Buck's leash and their emergency folder with insurance papers and headed out to the car. Tom was standing by the truck, an unreadable expression on his face. What is it? She asked. He pointed up the hill behind their property where flames had now appeared at the top of the ridge. What had been a distant threat just hours ago was now visibly descending toward their community. We need to go now, he said. Forget the rest. They did one final check of the house, making sure all windows were closed and appliances turned off. It seemed almost absurd, these normal precautions in the face of an approaching inferno, but habits died hard. As they locked the front door, another meaningless gesture, Lily looked at the brass key in her hand. Would there be a door to unlock when they returned? They pulled out of their driveway, joining the slow procession of vehicles heading down the mountain. The normally 20-minute drive to the main road took over an hour with all the evacuation. Traffic. Cars inched forward, everyone tense but orderly. They passed 2 more sheriff's vehicles heading up, lights flashing, and several massive fire trucks lumbering up the narrow road. Lily watched in the side mirror as their home disappeared around a bend. The last thing she saw was the empty concrete pad where their water tank had stood, now covered in a layer of ash. Above it, the sky was dark with smoke, tinged red from the approaching flames. The firefighters will do their best, Tom said, noticing where she was looking. He reached across to squeeze her hand, his eyes on the road. "I know," she said. "But our tank was marked on their maps as a water source. The fire chief told us that last year. Said it was a valuable asset in these remote areas." Tom nodded, his jaw tight. They both understood what was left unsaid. In a wildfire situation, firefighters had to make hard choices about which properties could be defended and which couldn't. A reliable water source often made the difference. As they joined the main highway heading toward town, the evacuation route was now clogged with vehicles from several communities. Police officers directed traffic at intersections. Local volunteers handed out water bottles at the roadside. A digital sign that usually displayed speed limits now read, "Evacuation route, keep moving." Buck sat anxiously in the back seat, picking up on their stress. Lily reached back to pat his head. "It's okay, boy. We're safe now." But as she said it, she looked back once more at the mountain they called home. The entire ridgeline was now wreathed in smoke, with flames clearly visible in at least 3 different spots, and somewhere in the middle of it all was their house, standing alone without the protection they had counted on for so many years. The Valley View Motel had seen better days. The pale blue paint was peeling from the doors, and the neon sign flickered, inconsistently at night. But it was clean, pet-friendly, and most importantly, it had vacancies when hundreds of evacuees were searching for a place to stay. Tom and Lily had been lucky to get a room at all. They'd arrived at the evacuation center, a high school gymnasium filled with cots, only to find it already overflowing. The Red Cross volunteers had directed families with pets to the few motels in town that would accept them. Their room was small but functional. 2 queen beds with faded floral bedspreads, a bathroom with temperamental plumbing, and a TV bolted to the dresser. Buck settled uneasily on a blanket they'd brought from home, still confused by the sudden change. "Home sweet home," Tom said without much conviction as he set down their bags. "At least for now." Lily sat on the edge of one bed, her phone in hand, constantly refreshing the fire department's updates page. The latest map showed their neighborhood squarely in the red zone, meaning active fire. No detailed information about specific streets or houses was available. "Try not to look at that too much," Tom advised, sitting beside her. "It'll drive you crazy." But they both knew she wouldn't stop checking. How could she? Everything they owned, beyond what they'd packed in their 2 vehicles, was up on that mountain. The first night was the hardest. They lay awake in the unfamiliar beds, listening to the hum of the old air conditioner and occasional footsteps outside their door. Other evacuees pacing, unable to sleep. The motel had quickly filled with their neighbors and others from nearby communities. In the parking lot, vehicles sat loaded with hastily packed possessions, like a strange nomadic camp. By morning, a routine began to form. The motel's small breakfast area became an unofficial command center. People gathered there each morning, sharing whatever news they'd heard overnight, rumors about which areas had burned and which had been spared. The TV in the corner stayed tuned to the local news, and everyone fell silent whenever fire updates came on. "They say the wind shifted again last night," reported Mr. Parker, the elderly neighbor who lived up the road from Tom and Lily. "Pushed the fire east toward Copper Creek instead of down our way. My cousin's a volunteer firefighter," added another neighbor, stirring her coffee. "Says they're setting backfires along Ridge Road, trying to create a break before it reaches our homes." Tom and Lily listened carefully, sorting fact from wishful thinking. The official updates remained frustratingly vague. Fire 15% contained. Crews working to establish perimeters. Weather conditions remain challenging. By the second day, a bulletin board appeared in the motel lobby, covered with notes. People looking for missing neighbors, offering spare clothes, sharing phone chargers or rooms with extra space. A handwritten sign announced community meetings at the high school each evening. Local restaurants advertised free meals for evacuees. The town had rallied around them with remarkable speed and generosity. Lily found herself in the strange position of having nothing to do but wait. After 20 years of busy rural life, tending gardens, maintaining their property, working from home, the emptiness of the days felt wrong. Tom tried to fill the time by helping other evacuees, carrying supplies from donation centers, and offering to drive elderly neighbors to appointments. On the third day, as Tom and Lily ate breakfast in the crowded motel dining area, their phones alerted them to a new update. The fire department had posted higher resolution maps. Everyone in the room pulled out their devices at once, the clatter of breakfast suddenly forgotten. "I can almost see our street," Lily said, pinching the screen to zoom in further. The map showed a patchwork of colors: red for active fire, orange for burned areas, yellow for threatened zones, and green for areas considered safe. Their neighborhood was a mix of red and orange. Tom leaned in closer. "Can you tell which houses were hit?" "No, it's not detailed enough." Lily's voice caught. "I wish we knew something, anything, about our place." A woman at the next table overheard them. "My husband found a guy with a drone," she said. "Some kind of photographer. He's been taking aerial footage of some neighborhoods when the smoke clears enough. He posts the videos online." Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered around Tom's laptop as he searched for the drone footage. The photographer had organized his videos by neighborhood and street names. Scanning the list, Tom found Pine Ridge Road, South Section. "That's us," he said, his finger hovering over the play button. Several people put hands on his shoulders, offering silent support. This was more than curiosity. This was the first real glimpse of what they might be returning to. The video began with a date stamp from the previous afternoon. The drone flew over the familiar winding road, now barely recognizable. Some houses stood untouched, surrounded by blackened earth where the fire had somehow skipped over them. Others were nothing but foundations and chimneys rising from piles of ash. Lily gripped Tom's hand tightly as the drone moved closer to their area. "There's the Wilsons' place," she whispered. Their neighbor's house was still standing, though. The shed behind it had burned. The drone moved on. "Next should be us," Tom said, barely breathing. The screen filled with their property, and several people gasped. The fire had burned right up to their backyard, consuming their storage shed and part of the garage. The main house still stood, but smoke rose from what looked like a corner of the roof. Had the fire been caught in time, or was it still burning inside? The footage moved on to other properties, but Tom and Lily sat frozen, staring at the now changed image. "We still have a house," Lily finally said. "At least some of it." "We do," Tom agreed, "and that's more than some folks here can say." That afternoon, they attended a community meeting at the high school gymnasium. The converted shelter was packed with evacuees sitting on bleachers and folding chairs. At the front, a table held maps and microphones for fire officials. The fire chief, a woman with short gray hair and exhausted eyes, gave them the latest update. "I know you're all anxious for news about your homes," she began. "The fire is now 40% contained, but that still means 60% is actively burning. We've established a fire break along Ridge Road that's holding well, and we're cautiously optimistic that we can prevent further spread into the Pinewood Estates and Pine Ridge areas." A murmur ran through the crowd, the first truly hopeful. "News in days. When can we go home?" someone called out. "Not yet," the chief said firmly. "Even areas where the fire has passed remain dangerous. Damaged trees can fall without warning. Hotspots can reignite. Power lines are down in many areas. We're working 24/7 to make these areas safe, but it will take time." As the meeting continued, Tom noticed Lily staring intently at a map on the wall showing their neighborhood. He followed her gaze and realized what she was looking at: the small blue circle on their property that marked their water tank as a fire department water source. The map hadn't been updated. As far as the fire department was concerned, that resource was still there. "Should we tell them?" Lily whispered. Tom shook his head slightly. What good would it do now? On the fifth day, as they ate breakfast in the now familiar motel dining area, their phones chimed simultaneously with a new alert. The message was simple but powerful. "Phased re-entry begins tomorrow for Pine Ridge South and Pinewood Estates areas. Check website for schedule and safety instructions." The room erupted in a mix of cheers, relieved sighs, and even some tears. They were going home, or at least going to see what remained of home. The drive back up the mountain was like entering another world. Tom and Lily had been assigned a 2 p.m. time slot to return to their property, part of the phased re-entry, planned to prevent traffic jams on the narrow, damaged roads. They left Buck at a friend's house in town. The fire officials had been clear. First visits were for inspection only, not for moving back in. As they reached the foothills, both fell silent. The familiar landscape had transformed into something alien. Sections of once dense forest now stood as blackened toothpicks against the sky. Other areas remained puzzlingly untouched, green islands in a sea of ash. The fire's path had been strangely selective, taking one tree while sparing its neighbor, burning one side of the road while leaving the other intact. "It's so random," Lily whispered, rolling down her window despite the lingering smoke smell. The air felt different, charged somehow, as if the very atmosphere had changed. A checkpoint stood at the base of their road, where a tired-looking firefighter checked their IDs against a resident list. 2 hours max, he reminded them. Be out before dark. Watch for falling trees and hot spots. If you hear a crack or see any active smoke, get away fast. Tom nodded, gripping the steering wheel tighter as they drove past. The pavement was still intact, but the edges of the road had burned, leaving blackened ground where wildflowers had grown just days ago. Power lines hung dangerously low in spots, and crews in safety gear worked to clear fallen branches. The Wilsons' house came into view first, still standing as the drone footage had shown, but with scorch marks up one wall where the fire had nearly caught hold. Nobody was there yet. Perhaps they had a later time slot. Tom slowed as they approached their own driveway, neither of them quite ready for what they might find. The drone video had shown their house still standing but damaged. Now they would see the reality up close. He turned into their driveway, tires crunching on a new layer of ash and debris. Their property looked like a war zone. The tall pines they'd loved for their shade and privacy were now charred columns. The garden Lily had tended so carefully was simply gone, an unrecognizable patch of black earth. Their wooden fence had disappeared entirely, but the house, their house, one still stood. They parked and got out slowly, almost afraid to believe it. The garage had partially burned, its door warped and blackened. One corner of the roof showed fire damage, with tarps already placed by firefighters to prevent further harm if it rained. Windows were cracked from the heat, and the once white exterior was stained with smoke. But the structure was intact. "We still have a home," Tom said, his voice breaking slightly. They walked around the perimeter, taking stock. The fire's path across their property was clearly visible and strangely revealing. It had burned in a line from the ridge behind them, straight down toward their house. But then something odd had happened. "Look," Lily pointed, her voice filled with wonder. Surrounding the concrete pad where their water tank had stood was an almost perfect semicircle of unburned ground, as if an invisible shield had protected it. The fire had burned right up to what would have been the reach of their tank's fire hose, then somehow jumped over it, continuing on to burn their storage shed and damage the garage. They stood silent, staring at this impossible boundary line. It made no sense until suddenly it did. "The firefighters," Tom said. "They must have made a stand here." A voice behind them confirmed it. That's exactly what happened. They turned to find a woman in a firefighter's uniform, clipboard in hand. Her face was tired beneath her helmet, with lines etched by smoke and exhaustion. "I'm Chief Rodriguez," she explained. "Just checking on residents, making sure everyone's safe." "Our house is still here," Lily said, still sounding surprised. "But our garage and shed," Chief Rodriguez nodded. "We had to make some hard choices that night. Your place was marked on our maps as having a water source." She gestured to the empty concrete pad. "We sent a team here specifically because of that, thinking we could tap it to protect several properties in this area." Tom's stomach tightened. The tank was removed just a week ago. County code violation. The chief's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "I see. Well, we still made a stand here, used what water we had in our trucks, managed to save the main structure, but we couldn't spare enough for the outbuildings. I'm sorry about that." No, Lily said, quickly. "We're just grateful you saved our home at all. Thank you." After the chief left to check on other returning residents, Tom and Lily walked to their front door. The key still worked in the lock, Another small miracle that brought tears to Lily's eyes. Inside, the house smelled strongly of smoke, but was otherwise untouched. Family photos still hung on walls. Books remained on shelves. The power was off, the refrigerator already beginning to smell. But these were minor problems compared to what might have been. "We can clean this," Tom said, running a finger through the fine layer of ash that had somehow seeped in through closed windows. "Replace the broken glass, fix the roof, rebuild the garage. We're luckier than many." As they walked through each room, taking stock of their survival, a truck pulled up outside. Tom went to the window and saw a county vehicle. His jaw tightened as he recognized the tan uniform of a county inspector, the same department that had ordered their tank removed. The inspector looked different than the one who'd issued their violation notice, younger, with a clipboard, just like the first one had carried. He approached hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable with his task in the aftermath of such destruction. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson?" he called from the driveway. They stepped outside, ash crunching under their shoes. The inspector looked around at the damage, then down at his papers. "I'm here about—" he started, then seemed to reconsider his wording. "I have some information about the new emergency preparedness ordinance the county passed yesterday." He handed them a folder of official-looking documents. Tom opened it warily, scanning the first page. His expression changed slowly from suspicion to disbelief. "Is this for real?" he asked. The inspector nodded. "Yes, sir. The county is now requiring water tanks for all properties over 2 acres in high-risk fire zones. The permits will be expedited, and there's even a cost-sharing program to help with installation." Lily looked over Tom's shoulder at the papers. "And the setback requirement? The new ordinance allows for more flexible placement as long as the tanks are accessible to fire equipment," the inspector explained. He seemed eager to share this good news, perhaps to make up for his department's role in their ordeal. "So we can put our tank back?" Tom asked. "With the county's blessing this time?" "Yes, sir. And based on what happened here, your property has been designated as a priority installation site." The inspector looked genuinely sympathetic as he glanced at the empty concrete pad. "The fire chief made a special note in her report about your location." After the inspector left, Tom and Lily stood together at the edge of their property, looking at the bizarre boundary where the fire had stopped. That perfect semicircle around where their water tank should have been. 20 feet from the property line, Tom said thoughtfully. "That's where we'll put it this time. Not 18 inches too close." Lily nodded, taking his hand. "And this time, nobody will tow it away." A hawk circled overhead, perhaps looking for prey in the newly exposed ground. Life would return here. The forest would regrow, though it would take years. Their garden would bloom again next spring. The garage could be rebuilt, stronger than before. As they walked back to their smoke-stained but standing home, they passed the scorched earth that marked where the fire had burned, and the untouched ground where firefighters had made their stand. The division between destruction and salvation was clear as day. Sometimes 18 inches could make all the difference in the world.